Welcome to Kill Tank Radio, a 2CR production. Never scripted, always relevant, and on topics you want to hear about. Feel free to reach out if you have a suggestion or you'd like to be on the show. Do you think that officers treat it more like a profession than NCOs do?
A leader doesn't get to own any of the successes because the leader didn't do anything.
Every single NCO that I have worked with has at some point or another come up and said, "I got this, sir."
When do you invest in those young NCOs?
The RCO says, you just take that punch in the face.
There are no NCOs, there are no officers. It's all the leaders on the third floor trying to get the 2nd Cavalry Regiment to go to Poland, go to France, go down to Turkey all at the same time.
Hello, everybody. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about officer-NCO relations. For this particular episode, I dug deep, bottom of the barrel, lowest of the lowest that I could possibly find. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. I'm completely joking. I'm probably talking to the two best field grades I've had the honor of working with in 22 years. I'll let them introduce themselves, but before we do, I want to give you an idea of what this is going to be about. Officers and NCOs work hand in hand in our Army. The relationship can be a good thing. It can be something that benefits all parties, and it can also be something that's development for everybody. Or it can be counterproductive, and it can be people working against each other and the officer versus NCO kind of mentality, and that's what we want to avoid. Now, before you tune out because you say, well, I'm a PFC and this doesn't apply to me, it does. It applies to everybody, because at some point you will work hand in hand and have a counterpart that is an officer, but even right now, there's something for you to provide and something for you to gain from the officer that is in your chain of command. So, I'm Command Sergeant Major Burke. In the studio today, I have two fine gentlemen. We will start with the Regimental XO.
I'm Major Mike Hefti, the 2CR Regimental XO. Also spent time, did a year as the Squadron XO and then a year as the Squadron S3, 2nd Squadron, 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Did a year at MCCC as an instructor, a year at NTC as an OCT, have experience in ABCT, IBCT, and SBCT, doing my command time in IBCT. Deployments 1 to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, and then I guess you could count Poland as well up at the Enhanced Forward Presence.
Hashtag professional warrior. You can find him on Instagram.
Check.
The man, the myth, the legend, who has a voice for radio, I might add. We've officially decided that, that his DJ career will be very, very successful after this. But I'll let him introduce himself and talk.
I'll let the audience decide that on the voice. Major Ryan David, currently the Regimental Operations Officer. Spent time with the War Eagles, where I was the 3 in the XO. In my career, I've grown up in the light world with the 101st Range Regiment and then 10th Mountain Division. Gone over to Afghanistan twice and Iraq once, commanding with the 10th Mountain Division.
Hashtag I run really, 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 really far all the time. That's what I do.
Yeah. I don't see what's wrong with that. I look forward to this discussion. It's been great. I think we have a lot of stuff that we can tease out of here.
To kind of get started, we need to get to the mentality where it's leader business. It's not officer business. It's not NCO business. It's leader business. One thing that Colonel Hof, the regimental commander, has done really well is he's made things leader business.
There's a relationship, and with any relationship, that implies that this is a human endeavor. Warfare is a human endeavor, and we all have special areas and expertises that we bring to this, but in the end, it's people business, leader business, and a human thing that we all come together, and we're all driving towards something in the future.
Let me, from the NCO perspective. Now, obviously, I've worked with a lot of officers throughout my career, but one of the best that I ever saw was actually Captain Chad Jenkins. He was my PL, and it was a deployment. I don't remember. It was the 2nd or 3rd deployment. I don't want to say we were subject matter experts, but as far as what the mission we were doing, we were pretty good at it as far as NCOs. And I watched him come in as a PL. At the time, he was a lieutenant. And we're sitting around kind of a terrain model, little city kind of mock-up thing that we had about, we were talking about a target. And he let every single one of the squad leaders talk. And we talked through what we were thinking as far as actions on, and he kind of let us banter back and forth because we didn't always get along. But, as far as the squad leaders go and the platoon sergeant, and we were going back and forth, and then at one point, I don't remember how long it was into it, he finally just said, stop. And from there, he pitched the plan. I mean, it wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. It was his first one, but it was pretty good. And as the deployment went on, over the next 3 months, I just watched how he took all that experience and just unified it. It made us into a platoon that each of us had our different little kind of pockets of expertise, so to speak, and he just made it function together. He understood that, maybe he didn't have as much experience as us, but he did have a little bit more experience, so to speak, in the doctrine and how, fight land warfare and everything else, and how to kind of unify it all into one platoon that worked very, very well together. And it was one of the better platoons that I've ever been in. I kind of share that because it highlights a couple different things. As NCOs, we have the experience base. And I talked to all the first sergeants, all the senior NCOs about this. Even as a first sergeant, which can range from 12 to, we have some first sergeants that have 20 years of experience in the Army. And if you look at that entire time has probably been in the fight, some form or fashion. Maybe drill sergeant, but that even has its experiences too. They've done OCTs, they've done rotations, they've got combat deployments, but they're paired with a captain that has anywhere from 4 to maybe 6, maybe 7 years of experience. So there's a vast amount of difference. However, the experiences are different, and they still have to work together to make a cohesive team. And I think the key part of that is building trust. That I trust you, you trust me, and we also share the same common goal to make the platoon, the troop, or whatever size element we're talking about, we desire to make it the best we possibly can.
The first one, Sergeant Major, that strikes out at me, I started thinking initially when you were talking about the squad leaders around the train board. Hopefully I don't keep bringing up this guy's name, but Jocko. He talks a lot about the ownership and that extreme ownership. And so already the fact that the squad leaders are around the train board taking the ownership of their plan. And then there's that fine balance like you talked about. At one point the captain jumps in and says, okay, well, I'm going to streamline this to bring it into a shared common goal mission that we have to accomplish. Because again, they're looking at a little bit broader picture across breadth, not maybe just a specific piece of the objective that they're trying to solve, and kind of brings all that together. The importance of letting people own that plan. Because if there's a 100% plan that captain would have made, that's just perfect, but there's not the ownership from the NCOs that had a piece of it, that 80% plan executed violently from that NCO level with all of that experience is I think, going to be a lot more successful.
I'm going to jump on this part that you said, sir, ownership. And having NCOs that own the fight, their soldiers, all that and in between. How does that play into trust as far as the officer, being a PL coming in or being a troop commander coming in and seeing NCOs do that? How does that kind of validate their positions but help you do yours?
Honestly, only because I'll be vulnerable here.
It's okay. There's a room of trust. I mean,
this is the trust tree right here.
Trust tree, yeah, right?
It's not going to be shared with anyone. No, if I was going to sum it up, it'd be humility.
Okay.
And I think humility plays a large part of that trust. You're a young officer. You're an old officer. It doesn't matter. You get put into a position in command or as a platoon leader, as a field grade, real or perceived, that somehow you're going to have all the answers. And that every time, even as a senior NCO like yourself, you start to feel like every time you go up to the next position, well, now I got to have all the answers because they're looking up to higher headquarters.
Yeah, okay.
There's this fear, I think, that a leader can have where you show up to something, and if you don't demonstrate that assertive, I have all the answers, and if I somehow turn it over to you, that shows maybe I don't have the competence to do the job. I think it's a weird paradox. It's the exact opposite. I'm gaining trust when I give you that ownership, and I acknowledge I don't have the answers. You are the subject matter expert in that area. But I think humility can stand
in the way of that.
In the way of that trust, yeah. I see Major David over here kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, who knows? I go back to my first experience with Sergeant First Class Eric Jones, Staff Sergeant Molds, Marcelino, and Rodrigue. Very similar to the experience that you had. It was very much a partnership, creating shared understanding, and Sergeant Molds generally owned the movement plan. How to formulate that, be the lead squad, because that's what he was good at. Rodrigue, weapons squad leader, one of the best weapons squad leaders I have seen.
That's because you didn't know me when I was a weapons squad leader.
Yeah.
Fair.
But that was his bread and butter. That's what he knew. And he could talk and build and develop that plan, shared understanding across the platoon and then eventually the company, and he could execute it. And that built trust amongst the platoons, amongst the troops, but they all understood it, and it had shared buy-in and understanding, and everyone could execute, and everyone was comfortable. And it was very much my responsibility was to synchronize that, and they understood their individual pieces. And they knew that as well, that if they made a mistake, it was my plan, and I underwrote their mistake because they made it honestly. And they all felt part of a team. And I think that's something that you need to foster. The humility absolutely goes into that, that if it's my plan and I develop the plan and say you're going to execute, there is no shared understanding. There is no buy-in. There's no desire to prove my worth because it's just going to be directed and I'm going to be told what to do. Whereas I can voice my concerns as soon as we walk out the door. It's the plan. We all understand it. We all know what we're doing. Shared buy-in and shared understanding, and the humility aspect, absolutely.
You know, that ownership piece that you're talking about right there, and I'm not going to be like Major Hefti and quote Jocko. Ah, crap. I just quoted Jocko. No, but that ownership piece is huge. It plays both ways, okay? As a leader, where you allow them to own the plan, or whatever you're doing. It could be a training task too, or it could be a training range or anything else. The other key part of that is the officers that stand out in my mind, they also owned the failures. I've seen PLs. I've seen a lot higher than PLs, but I won't dig into that, where something didn't go right, and what do they instantly do? They say, yeah, those, my squad leaders, they just, they weren't listening to me on the radio, or they weren't doing this, or they weren't doing that. I've seen a wide array of officers do that throughout their career. But then I've also seen the latter, too, that say, yep, sir, roger, sir, I will work on that, sir. I will do better, sir, roger, sir. It just owns it. The RCO says, you just take that punch in the face. It's yours. It's yours to own, and you own it. Now, granted, the conversation that you have behind closed doors is a little bit different with the NCOs and the leaders within the platoon, but I think that's another important part too. And then from the NCO's perspective, they have to own it as well. They have to own their piece of the puzzle in helping that officer be successful as well, especially at the platoon leader level. It's not just the platoon sergeant, it's every single person in that platoon that does that. They can either get on the team, because if they don't, it will divide the team, especially at the platoon level. I mean, it'll continue up, but a platoon is such a small element, and they see each other so frequently that if there's a divide, everybody knows the divide, and they see the divide bright as day that happens within that platoon. So it's important that they do that, and then they build the trust that we're talking about kind of throughout that entire process, because there is mentorship. There's mutual mentorship all the way around. And what I've told many of first sergeant, and quite frankly platoon sergeants as well, what you have to understand is that the chances that lieutenant will become a troop commander or a company commander someday is very, very likely. Did you help him become a good PL in the process, so that when he's a troop company commander, he knows how to train PLs. He knows how to mentor PLs, and that's an important piece of that.
You just hit on something. You started making me think of Simon Sinek, Sergeant Major.
Okay.
We've had this conversation, I think, in one of our...
Another popular person that we talk about on this podcast.
Yes.
We're going to have to start paying royalties. Sorry.
He talks about going to CEOs and saying, hey, so what do you exist for? And the CEO turns around and he's like, well, let's take care of the customer. And, of course, Simon Sinek's response is, when's the last time you saw a customer? You haven't, because you're dealing with managers, et cetera. And that challenge of leadership, a leader doesn't get to own any of the successes, because the leader didn't do anything. It was the subordinates that had those successes.
Right.
And so it's tough as a leader. You got to give all those successes away to someone else, and then you absolutely own all those failures, like Major David was saying earlier about underwriting them. And you hit on something big with the first sergeant mentorship as well, and I'd say really just leader mentorship is, how have you helped that person not become the best, but be the best that they can be? Because everyone has a different set of talents, things like that, like Major Dave was talking about, an NCO that was particularly good at one area as opposed to another.
Well, and I think, as a first sergeant, you have a little bit more experience. As a platoon sergeant, I had 4 platoon leaders. I also had the honor of teaching ROTC up at University of Washington, Seattle. Which was a phenomenal experience working with cadets, so shaping future officers as well. The point I'm really trying to make is that you have that experience, so when you look at those PLs and you have that maturity, you could say, exactly what you're talking about. Here's his strengths, here's his weaknesses, but more importantly, from watching him, here's how he learns. Here's what works and here's what does not work. The yelling and over the top, that doesn't work. However, sitting down and having explaining things to him works really, really well. That's the formidable years. It's just like E1 through E4, young Sergeant Burke. Those were the most important years that shaped who I became as a leader. NCOs, strong NCOs that you've had shaped your expectations of NCOs and what you thought? And your first platoon sergeant, or your first sergeant, you compared them to those NCOs, those strong NCOs you had throughout your life.
Yeah, I had the picture of First Sergeant Rick Skidis pop into my head.
Yeah.
And it's the same stuff. How did he interact with me versus the first platoon leader and the second platoon leader? But I look at him and how he interacted with me versus the other folks is markedly different.
Right.
The fatherly sit-down advice about, hey, you really jacked that up over here. Here's what we think you did wrong, and here's how you probably should have approached it, versus the just bludgeoning of someone else.
Right.
It pays dividends, and then taking that and understanding your subordinates, how to influence those squad leaders or the staff officers that we have right now. There are some people that respond to very direct leadership, and there's others that just respond very much to, let's go have a conversation, and interacting with those people, finding the ways to push their buttons to get things done is absolutely important. That's something that I learned from those NCOs growing up.
I had this PL, and unfortunately I don't remember his name. It was a specialist, I believe. And I remember he had kind of this office that was almost kind of a closet. And he had all his gear in there, and he left it unlocked. All the privates and some of the team leaders, they went in there and they messed with all this stuff. And I'll never forget his RTO. Aaron Dwarf was the guy's name. When the PL showed up in the morning, Aaron was kind of loitering around the area. He's like, hey, sir, I'm going to help you score away your kit this morning. Anyway, before PT, because I think we were actually doing like a kit run that day, basically Aaron went and he helped him set up his body armor. Okay, and being in Ranger Regiment, like, you look at somebody and you judge them. How they have their kit set up directly reflects, are they an assaulter? Are they a support person? What do they do for a living? I mean, it's just the truth. You judge a book by its cover. And he spent probably about 45 minutes, an hour before PT helping him score away his kit. And, and as he was doing it, he was kind of moving all this other, jackassery that all these people have been doing in his office and everything. And I just remember thinking, like, success. Helping this PL succeed instead of, demeaning him or kind of being unprofessional. Instead, he took the time out to make sure that when he stepped in front of the platoon and we went out and did platoon PT that morning, that, he looked the part. Now, it's always stuck with me. It's always been something I've thought of. I don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
I see this, sometimes we'll get a younger NCO on staff or a younger officer on staff, and they'll ask questions, and sometimes you'll see other people that maybe are a little bit more senior, have been around for a second within the staff that kind of act like, how do you not know that?
Yeah, right. I think, there's three kind of different categories that I'd really like to kind of focus on us on. And, it's the mentorship, the feedback, and the integration. And what I mean by that is how does the NCO relation placate into those three different kind of categories? Any thoughts on that, Major David? He's sitting over there contemplating.
I'm contemplating, and I'm looking at the approach on how I approach what I call the third floor enterprise right now.
It is an enterprise.
It is an enterprise. Sometimes it crashes into asteroids. Other times it doesn't. But I look at it that.
Oh, you just did a Star Trek reference.
I did.
Oh man, I went a completely different way. Okay.
No.
Dork.
Well, yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
So when I look at us, we're a small division. We truly are. 2CR is a small division.
We're responsibility for airspace, embassies across Europe. And what does that mean? That means that a captain that just showed up to staff is expected to operate as a major. Mm-hmm. A sergeant first class that just showed up from a squadron is expected to be a master sergeant or a junior sergeant major in effect.
Right.
And how do you develop, or how do you empower, or how do you express to them that I know you're a captain? You're going to be able to produce stuff at a major's level, and I want you to do that. And I think that the easiest thing, or the thing that I've had most success with, is just blatantly saying, hey man, I look at you as a major. I look at Major Hefti as a lieutenant colonel. I look at Colonel Hof as a general officer because of the amount of stuff that we have to do. Sergeant Major Rivas, you're a CSM, you're doing all of this stuff. And you know what?
And Sergeant Major Burke, you're a PFC at best.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're the Sergeant Major of the Army.
Yeah,
but I look at it and I say,
whoa,
this is what I expect you to do. Right. And you know what? Like you said earlier, I own their mistakes, and I tell them that I expect you to go out and make decisions. Make decisions in the best way possible that you can do, and make them from the goodness of your heart because you're trying to solve a problem. And you know what? If you make the right decision, great. We're all swimming in the right direction. If you make the wrong decision, I will own it. I will absolutely own it because I'm a major and I can survive more heat rounds to the chest than you can as a captain.
Right.
Absolutely can. And you know what? Sometimes they make the wrong decisions.
But they made a decision.
But they made a decision.
Yeah.
And the organization is still going in some direction. Hopefully it's in the right direction. That's where, at this point, the third floor enterprise is the leadership business. There are no NCOs. There are no officers. It's all the leaders on the third floor trying to get the 2nd Cavalry Regiment to go to Poland, Sabre Guardian, go to France, go down to Turkey all at the same time. Because you have captains that are going up to Finland to go make a decision on a squadron deployment to go somewhere.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that I've seen or had the most value with is just go make decisions.
Yeah. It's always amazing to me how in line you always are with the RCO's, commander's intent and the CG's commander's intent. From having one conversation, immediately transitioning that conversation to another one, and just never skipping a beat. It's impressive to see. You take the top 6, the RCO, myself, the DCO, Sergeant Major Rivas, and then you two. It doesn't matter who it is, what room they find themselves in. They're going to be able to have the same conversation and be in line with one another. It's because we're constantly talking. All right, I'm going to ask a provocative question. Do you think that officers treat it more like a profession than NCOs do?
I wish if I would have known that question, I would have brought the Webster's definition of professional. Initially, the Army profession, original doctrine that existed, really talked a lot about how you start as like an apprentice and training, and then you move on to be eventually a professional. And there's no set time on that. Obviously, you take a look at a first-time enlistment, probably don't quite know yet what it's about. You make that decision to go to second-time enlistment, kind of what's that look about. For officers, that's probably usually happening on average around captain. That's the time that they have a decision to get in or out. If you're a professional, you really embody every creed that exists. NCO creed, Ranger creed, Warrior creed. It's all about being a professional and how well you know your profession.
Right.
So I don't even think it's necessarily about officer versus NCO. This would almost go back to before we were talking about mentorship, integration, and feedback. For me, it's, yes, the first step, make a decision. But after that, it's on the leader to now say, okay, why did you make that decision? Well, because so-and-so told me at my last unit that's how we do stuff. Well, where's the thirst to know for yourself? Is
Right.
that what the regulation says? Is that what doctrine says? Have you studied it? Have you seen other ways? If you're going to be a machine gunner, do you understand how your optics work? If you're going to be an M4 rifleman, do you understand how your ACOG works, or are you just putting the red echelon at the top on your target because you think that's the best way to shoot because you can see it easier than the hash marks? And you never went back to look at the TM because you wanted to be a professional at what you did. If you're an officer, and do you understand the regulations? Do you have the curiosity? That profession of, okay, I'm going to have to learn because I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Instead of just shying to what you do know.
right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could. It is a provocative question. I think it's tough to just simply break it down officer versus NCO. I think from young ages, there are people like, this is what I want to do.
Doctors. If you're not a master of your profession, what happens? People die or maimed for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
The Army is no different. Just because, we're maybe not deploying, and those that do, it's not necessarily, what it has been in the past, but we never know what tomorrow brings. What you train, what you know, and what you train others on is going to be the difference between life or death. And it might not even be the now. It might be 10 years down the road, young, Sergeant Burke, trained by Platoon Sergeant X, might remember something, and it results in being successful on a mission or not being successful and people die. And we have to think about it that way as leaders, that we have that responsibility, that even the people that we're training here and now eventually are going to be to the higher rank, and we are part of that development process.
And then we NCOs, officers, everyone are responsible for accounting for those folks that don't meet the certification standard, don't maintain to continue to develop themselves. Similar to the medical community, similar to lawyers, we have the requirement to police our own, to make sure that we're within our own standards that we have developed, that are clearly articulated, and that people are still kept abreast of what are the current requirements, whether they're warfare or inoculations for immunizations. That is part of the profession. And I think that when we look at if there is a divide, I think it's not officer NCO. I think it's a tactical application professional who's applying everything that those generalists or those enterprise level leaders are professionals in.
Yep.
Mike, with the regimental XO perspective, is responsible for, like you said, staffs that are more knowledgeable in a certain thing than he is. He's responsible for that. It is his professional requirement as a leader to be knowledgeable enough and up to date on everything that they need to do in order to apply them appropriately to enable Sergeant David to apply the tactics and the professional doctrine that he understands on the battlefield. I think there's a divide at echelon as opposed to a divide by rank or NCO officer.
If I could jump in, and hopefully this doesn't sidetrack it too much.
Absolutely not.
We're talking here about leadership and where and when you become a profession, and then when do you invest in those young NCOs? We have these expectations. The most important person to me, I think, in the entire Army is the alpha team leader. That person can stop an entire brigade all because he got lost with his team or because he decided to take a short halt.
Right.
And I got it. It's probably taking it to a little extreme there.
No, it creates a ripple effect. I mean, absolutely.
It does. Who would be the first people that the average leader would send to that professional development?
Probably officers.
Officers, platoon sergeants, maybe, probably first sergeant commander and up.
Right.
So it's not that we wouldn't send NCOs, it would just be quite senior NCOs. But did the officer who's been probably studying that in some sort of Captain's Career Course or AOBC or IOBC or some sort of other leader PME, professional military education course, they've probably already been reading and looking at that.
Yeah.
At what point did we introduce the squad leader to those same exact concepts, especially as we talk about the leadership, the difference between yelling and inspiring, and how to build a team? And did we equip them with those tools? We gave them all kinds of great weapons. Did we train them on the one most important weapon that costs so much money, which is that human endeavor? Did we equip them to handle that human weapon?
That can lead into about 5 other discussion points.
More podcasts.
More podcasts, talking about NCO, PME. I'm going to ask you guys a question I want you to think about. What do you want out of an NCO? What's your expectations of an NCO? And while you guys think about that, I'm going to talk about my side of the fence. Having a clear vision, laying out what their expectations are, their strengths and their weaknesses, and relying on my experience. They never belittle or try to discount the experience that I do have. And I know no matter what the subject, even if it's an emotional one for me, and I'll have subjects that I'm extremely emotional about. And when I come to them, even with that emotion, they're going to hear me out. Now, granted, they're going to probably have to tell me to dial it back, but they're always going to have the kind of that open kind of minded philosophy. When something is getting under their skin, something is making them mad, they're seeing something that maybe I'm quite frankly not, they come to me and they don't let it fester and they don't let it build up and then they have an explosion. The shared understanding and that, that mutual trust is really what I need. They can lead the organization through that, making sure that they allow the NCOs that have the experience to tie in or to have a vote as well. So, who wants to go first?
I think for NCOs, the care of the soldier. NCOs will interact with soldiers far more often, I think, and have a far better pulse than the officer will. That doesn't mean officers should not absolutely be trying to get out, but just the way it's structured, from a team leader to a squad leader to a platoon sergeant, those NCOs have got to care for those soldiers and then be the eyes and ears for the commander of when morale's low. Okay, what are some recommendations to improve it, because we still have a mission to do? Some words that I won't forget is what you hear the RCO say all the time. Command Sergeant Major Burke and I, and then whatever it was. Whether you signed up for it or not.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But it is that first step that it is a command team, and those two own all of the bad that's going to happen based on those decisions. I think the other thing is looking for out of an NCO is to play off each other's strengths. The commander may be a soft-spoken intellectual who approaches problem sets differently. And the first sergeant may be the more motivational public speaker with a loud enough voice to inspire the soldiers.
Right.
It could also be completely opposite, where the first sergeant, based on his strengths and experiences and jobs he's come from, is phenomenal at administrative work and tracking NCOERs and managing the orderly room and maybe even supply and maintenance. And that officer is really good at expressing publicly a vision, but not so good with the administrative things. And so I think it goes back to that team concept, playing off each other's strengths, and then using that instead of pinning yourself into a role of, well, I'm an officer, this is officer business, and I'm an NCO, and this is NCO business. And then, just so I don't go on too long, probably the last one is just executing the right thing. That lieutenant might know it and be able to recite it off doctrine, but has he ever executed it?
Right.
And if that NCO is not enforcing that officer to do the right thing, and so if that young lieutenant who's setting up an M4 range is like, yeah, that's good, we just have to get this done, and that NCO is not being like, sir, that's not the standard.
Yeah.
Like, we need to execute it like this. So looking for that honest feedback and saying, no, this is the way we got to do it.
No, that's good. It's really good.
I wrote 4 things down.
Okay, go ahead.
3 of them already been covered. You covered most of them. Mike got one of them. The team. It's absolutely a team. It sets the face of the organization. At Echelon, it's absolutely a team. A sergeant major, a commander, a major, their ops sergeant major, first sergeant, commander, whatever it is, it's a team. Those 2 will offset strengths and weaknesses, just like you said. A partnership and a sounding board. You have markedly different experiences than I do. I will never have your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You will never have my experiences. But together, that is a holistic view of what should occur in an organization or what should not occur in an organization. And I think those 2 play in very nicely. And then the last thing I would say is covering of blind spots. Every single NCO that I have worked with has at some point or another come up and said, I got this, sir. I don't even know what he has yet because I didn't even know the problem existed. But it's like, I got this is what we're doing about it. You don't need to worry about it.
Right.
And I think that plays back into covering the blind spots. There's a lot of things that I will never realize go on.
Yeah.
That Sergeant Major Revis, that First Sergeant King, that First Sergeant Skidis, Sergeant First Class Eric Jones did that occurred because he had that perspective and that unique view on things and just could take care of things that I didn't even know existed. So those are the 4 main things that I look for. And I'm glad to see that it's shared in unison across a lot of different views.
That's pretty phenomenal. I'm gonna share a story that I think I thought of when Major Hefti was talking, and I think definitely it resounded. Iraq, 2003. I'm a squad leader, platoon sergeant who's actually still in the Army. Pretty high rank sergeant major now, not high ranking platoon sergeant. He's the best platoon sergeant ever. We're in a pretty good tick. Troops in contact. The way we kind of came off the aircraft, the PL, he's on the high ground. And the platoon sergeant is down below, and us squad leaders were kind of fighting through the fight. Basically just doing a movement to contact. As I'm trying to, move the teams and kind of fight through this and get the automatic, machine guns and everything, into the right positions as we kind of go so I can set for the next squad. I hear over the radio, I hear the platoon sergeant say, Bravo 2-6, hey, you need to come down off the ridge line. You need to come to my position so that I can move forward. He said, Roger, and he moved. But looking back, especially afterwards, and we all went back up to the ridge line, so that we could exfil. We looked down, and I mean, it was literally like carnage. I remember thinking, why did this PL give up this position? I mean, he could see everything, and I remember asking him, why did you move down? And he's like, well, the platoon sergeant told me to. The reason is that he wanted him to move down. He had a good position where he could see just as much, but he needed him there so that he could move forward and continue to fight the squads as we were pushing forward. And it just plays into exactly what you guys were talking about there. They need to be at the point of friction making those split-second decisions because they have the experience that plays into that. But also that trust that PL had. Because he even said, he felt that he had great control, especially with the aviation asset. He was controlling where he was at. But he had such trust in the platoon sergeant that the platoon sergeant said, hey, sir, I need you to move down here. Without hesitation, he moved there. And you want to get to that level of trust. Whatever leadership position you find yourself in, NCO, officer, you want to have that type of relationship because that is what will save lives. Because indecisiveness, banter, discord results in death. When you look at the history of the NCO, you look back to Baron von Steuben, General Pershing's, all these people that have advocated for the NCO Corps. The NCO Corps needs to be strengthened in our Army so that officers can do what they need to do. The NCOs will lead the soldiers. Is kind of that cry that NCOs need to be these professionals that we're talking about and help facilitate the development, the mentorship, both ways with their officer counterparts or the officers they find themselves underneath. Because at the end of the day, we're in this together. And then we are all we have got. And we're going to have to fight through this, and we're going to have to figure this out together. But when the bullets are flying and the bombs are exploding on the battlefield, you're in it together. You have to work together, and you have to see everybody through it. Thank you. I appreciate you guys coming in. You guys are awesome. I'm going to be sad to see you two leave, but I know the two officers that are coming behind you are going to do just as great a job. This is Dragoon 7, signing off.